This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to episode 211 of Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is Private Internet Access. If you've ever surfed the web and wanted to do it securely, especially when you're traveling or using someone else's network, you definitely need private internet access. Private internet access allows you to have a secure VPN without them logging what data what you're doing, what transactions you're making, or anything like that, to connect to anywhere in the world. You can also change your default location so it appears as if you're coming from a different place. Why is this helpful, you say? If you're not doing anything nefarious, well, it's really helpful if you want to test DNS resolution from different places and different time zones. It's a really cool tool, and it's not very expensive at all. You can get plans starting at $3.99 a month, and you can find out more by going to geekleader.com/VPN. Again, that's geekleader.com/VPN. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Dr. Paula Caligiuri, and she is a business professor, but also the president of Task Global and the founder of Skillify, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and the author of a book called Build Your Cultural Agility. And we're going to talk a lot about that because, as you know from listening to the show, culture is kind of important for me when it comes to leadership and building that great culture of a team. And we're going to learn more about that today. So, Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Great to be with you.
If you don't mind, tell the audience a little bit about how you got to where you are today and what your career journey has been like so that we can lay some context for the conversation.
Sure, happy to. Actually, it has a pretty flat start. I was 20 years old in 1987, and I was studying abroad in Rome, Italy. But unfortunately for me, 1987 was the Black Monday, so the market crashed, as did the money I had saved to study abroad. So I was in Italy with all the other American kids, and all the American kids, for the most part back then, were wealthy. I was not. I called home to mom and dad and asked for money, and they said, "Sweetheart, get a job." So I was in Rome, spent time with, worked. You had Italian friends, an Italian boyfriend. I spent time with my relatives down in southern Italy. I had a much more natural experience as opposed to running around with other Americans, running around Europe. Mm-hmm. So what ended up happening, I returned to finish out my psychology degree, and some psychology professors said, "Paula, you seem different. Something's different about you. We now know it as repatriation adjustment, but back then we didn't." So they said, look, if that experience in Italy, because I was returning back to Buffalo, New York, I should also mention that. So returning from Italy back to Buffalo, and they said, hey, if it had such a profound effect on you, why don't you study it? So this can fast forward. I said, back in 1988, my graduate school applications said, I want to study what makes people effective living and working internationally, and I want to know how they change from deep developmental cross-cultural experiences. So my joke that, 30 something years later, I am still studying what makes people effective living and working internationally and how they change from deep developmental cross-cultural experiences. I've been doing the same thing for a long time. But I've been blessed to work with, lots of leading organizations around the world, the military, the Peace Corps, everything in between. So it's been quite an honor, and as well as doing the research in this area.
So what has your research shown you? Like, what are some of the big things, the highlights of your career as far as learning about the coming back to America or the culture in general, right? And how important it is for businesses?
Yeah, so many people think that in order to work in a multicultural environment, you need to really understand, the depths of the kind of the behaviors and the culture of the values of the people that you're working with. And actually, what my research is finding is that's not, it's necessary but not sufficient. So it's important to still learn about those with whom you're interacting, but more important is, do you have the competencies in order to be successful in these multicultural environments? Are you tolerant of ambiguity? Are you humble? Do you have curiosity? Do you have perspective taking and empathy? In other words, you have these things that enable you to just thrive and really get the most out of that unique experience that you're in.
So let's say you don't have some of those skills. Is that something you can build and you can learn? Because I've said it several times on the show that I sometimes struggle with empathy. Sometimes I struggle seeing things from other people's perspective, and I have to be very intentional, like before a one-on-one, to really focus in on, what this person's day, week, or month has been like, and try to put myself in that shoe. Like I literally take 15 minutes before every one-on-one just to sit and try to think about what this person's like right now, so I can kind of relate to them a little bit better, maybe speak to them a little bit nicer or a little bit kinder, and to have that more empathetic approach. Is that skills that are all these skills that can be developed, or the things that are just inherently you have it or you don't?
Well, look, can I just say, I appreciate the honesty there, because it's you and everyone else on the planet. I mean, we naturally do this. I mean, we're social animals, but in terms of taking the time in order to really see that someone could be seeing a situation through a different lens, that takes skill. To answer your question, yes, there's of every single one of those competencies that I named, there's a nature portion,
Mhm.
kind of related to how our bodies handle serotonin and dopamine, how quickly our brains kind of go to closure and want to understand fully the other person and believe we can predict what they're thinking and feeling, like you were just describing. And then there's a nurture side, which is that ability, skills and experiences, and really that ability to gain each of those competencies. So just like you said, I take 15 minutes before any one-on-one. That what you're doing is you're putting yourself into almost like a state of presence and mindfulness. You're slowing down your limbic processor to actually understand that this person could be coming from a different lens. It's critical, but it's not something any of us do naturally.
Yeah. So, what are some other tactics that maybe I could learn from and help me get better at this? Like I said, I have that 15-minute ritual, I guess, that you would say that I do, but I don't know of anything else I can do to kind of develop some of these skills to improve that. What I hate the term. Some people call it soft skills, but for me, those are really hard. So they're not like I hate the term soft skills because it makes it seem like it should be just natural and easy, but it's not for some people.
Yeah.
But what are some things
I
that we
love
can
the
do
phrase soft skills. I think it's cool because then you can say these soft skills are hard. And frankly, this is hard. You're
Yes.
going, and to your point, you're going against everything that's natural. So if you're interviewing, or you're one-on-one, or you're in a team, or you have a client, or you're in a meeting with someone who's demographically different, what happens is just that interaction is a situation of novelty. Even if you're Zooming with members of a team who are different cultures and different generations or from a different functional area, you're in a situation of novelty. Whenever we as humans get into any situation of novelty, our brain is incredibly lazy. Our brain is always incredibly lazy. We want to move very quickly to cognitive ease, to cognitive closure. We want to be able to interpret things around us, from the exact same lens. So part of it is getting better. And one of the skills you can build up fairly readily is to get yourself more and more comfortable with novelty. So
Mhm.
do that would be, atypical of you, doing things that would be out of your norm, going a different route, trying different foods, doing things like anything that kind of keeps expanding your comfort in novelty, because that will start to translate to situations of novelty, like being with someone from a different culture or
Yeah.
different generation or whatever. That's one example.
Yeah, I think I heard someone say one day that you need to be comfortable. You need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think it was the guy. He wrote a book. I think it was like 1,000 rejections or something like that, where he tried to get rejected every day by asking something uncomfortable or doing something uncomfortable. Whether it was going to, one example was he went to Krispy Kreme and asked them to make donuts in the shape of the Olympic rings. And they're like, we don't sell that. He's like, well, I want you to do it. That's my ask. He's hoping he would get rejected. He would go to people's houses and say, can I play soccer in your yard? Because you have a soccer net. And like, no, who's this weirdo, coming to my yard? But he just did it just to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And
You
it's
can
one
get
of
arrested, so that's a good thing.
that's true. Yeah. So those are some of the things that I see. How do these skills play uh, into expanding the culture of, let's say, a team or something like that? Because in technology, sometimes we have this traditional tech folks, and you want to expand your culture. You want to try to be more diverse, have a more diverse team, so that you can get better ideas and improve creativity and things like that. What are some skills that are you mentioned all the skills, I guess, that are needed, but what are some ways that we can try to cultivate this within our team, not just at the leadership level?
Yeah. John, it's a great question because I think especially now when we're all of us are leveraging technology in order to work together. So this interview is happening kind of at the tail end, or we hope the tail end of COVID. But we've all been working virtually for a long time. All of our teams have been virtual. The more we assume similarity, or the more we don't really, and we're not paying attention to the fact that things are different. So if we're all tech people, then we must all be similar, right? So the more you assume similarity, the greater the risk is that you're going to step into a cultural challenge. What I'm seeing now when I'm on, say, for example, I'll just give you a sort of basic example. When I'm on Zoom calls with people from different cultures, nobody's really thinking that they're in a different cultural situation, but they are.
Yeah.
So, for example, Americans are tremendously informal. We are, just we're accessible and we say it like it is, and we're pretty. So I'll watch like my colleagues, my American colleagues, on a call, and they're eating breakfast, or I had one not too long ago where, she had just gone for a swim in the morning. She had her bathing suit on, she put a towel around, her hair is wet, and she's on the call. It was, so for an American, you're efficient, right? You went for your swim, now you're on the call, it doesn't really matter. But to all those on the call, it seemed disrespectful. Just kind of another example, the use of something as basic as smiling and silence. Mm-hmm. I know this is a podcast, so you can't see. I was socialized to smile when I was a little girl, and I wasn't smiling. My mom and dad asked what was wrong. So my default is to smile. In many cultures around the world, that seems strange that I would be smiling for no apparent reason. It's viewed basically, their limbic systems are processing that as she's not serious, she's not credible, she's not trustworthy. Silence. Our culture, we tend to, I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk. Other cultures use silence. So if an American brain is, our limbic processors are hearing that silence and thinking the person's checked out, disinterested, disengaged. Other cultures would view silence as respectful, showing engagement, showing thoughtfulness, and the like. So with all of these kind of minor, what feels like minor things, we just need to remember that even if we're all tech people, we need to recognize that there's still cultural differences present.
Yeah, sometimes that's really hard. I know I've had some team members that we've had discussions with because, their feedback that we get from other users are that they have listening problems, or they're not listening. And it turns out that it's not that they're not listening, but it's the way that maybe they're not listening very well, but it's more like their culture has, this expectation that you need to respond with the correct answer, not that you need to take time to think about it. You have to have the response and it has to be correct. And, we had to say, well, in our culture, it's more important to listen, have a pause, think about the answer, and then give the correct, response versus just being the first to get it out there. When you're the first to get it out there, the assumption is you're not listening to the words that we're saying. You're just thinking of your response. And it's one of those things that's difficult, but how do you adapt your leadership style to be appropriate for all the cultures that are involved, especially like on a Zoom call with like 10 or 12 people that are all different places?
Right. So that's a great question. So I just want to respond to your people who kind of tend to jump in or talk over. That is very cultural. And in some cultures, so I gave you the example of, the Anglo, I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk, like you described, the little pause in between. And then many other cultures have a much longer 4 or 5 seconds of silence before someone jumps in, which to us, to an American ear, would sound very long. But in other cultures, many of the Latin cultures, you're socialized to show engagement by talking over each other. And it's like a dance. You're talking, I'm enthusiastic about what you're saying, so I'm jumping in with a thought, kind of continuing the flow of the conversation. So when you imagine those 3 groups together, you've got everybody misperceiving what the other is. So to your question, as a leader, one of the things you can do is set some ground rules. Say, you know what, we all have these beautiful communication styles, and they're all great when we're with those from our own countries and our own cultures. But hey, we each have different styles. So here on our team, we're going to do it this way, or we're going to, we're never going to jump in. We're only going to go around, or if you want to speak up, we're going to wait and give everyone a chance to fully finish. So it basically, it takes whatever we would process quickly and putting it, making it more prefrontal cortex, executive processing. We're thinking about it. It might be like, for example, response time is another great example. How quickly do you think you should be receiving an answer after asking a question via Slack or a text or email or whatever? That can all be, you can all, place a behavioral norm about that. It's in the book, we call it the cultural integration. The idea of you say, okay, I'm going to create a team culture. It's not going to look like anyone else's culture. It will be uniquely our team's, but as a leader, I'm going to keep reinforcing these behaviors, just like your mom and dad did, to either keep your shoes on or take your shoes off when you walked in the house. There's something that made you now, whenever you walk into someone's house, you either keep your shoes on or take them off. It's a behavior that was socialized in you. And that's what you are doing as a leader. You keep socializing behaviors.
So those cultural norms that you develop as a leader, should those be documented, or what's the most effective way of communicating something like that? Like going back to response time that you said. I know in my current role, when I came to this company, there was an expectation that you respond right away. Whether you had the answer or not, you're going to respond right away. And, it was bizarre to me because I came from a place where if it's after hours, just wait till you come back in and respond. So I would send emails, not knowing the culture that they're going to have to respond at like 7, 8 o'clock at night. And then they would jump on and respond. And I'd be like, well, why are you're off? Don't respond when you're off. And, how should those be communicated when you have those differences?
Yes. So how should they be communicating? Yes. You just want to make sure someone is communicating those, like, to be able to, so every organizational culture is different. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more, but every organizational culture is different. Every team culture is different. So how you socialize norms in your team is similar to saying, how did you get socialized? How does one family's norms get socialized compared to another? In some cases, teams are very structured at the start of the team. They work through all these differences, and it's chartered and it's like very specific. The reality is most people think about it once things are going wrong, and that's cool. You just set up some time to, have an open dialogue about, hey, not right, not wrong, just different. Here's what we're going to do. You know what, everybody? We want to respect work-life balance. And so we're going to hold all communications. Here's the send feature, timed send, we're going to use that more so that no one's feeling the need to respond. During business hours, we expect, however you guys do it, and however it gets communicated so that but it has to be reinforced. So, it could be, a joke at the start of the meeting. Okay, so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, they all violated the no after work, or it could be, good for so-and-so for, clearly using the same item. Whatever works for your norm of your team, of your group, that's how I would recommend.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm just testing to make sure I'm doing the right things. I actually did something similar to that, like where I had the no respond after hours, because I wanted people to realize that when you're off, you need to be spending time with your family. You need to be, rebooting. Don't just stay focused on work. If you focus on work all the time, you're going to be bad at work. Focus on other things, you have your mind expanded and leave work. I don't want to say leave work at work, but yeah, don't focus on work when you're doing other things. You need to have that space to be creative and think about other items. And
sorry.
I was just to say, I actually put that in their reviews, that, one negative mark in the annual reviews is that, you were too accessible. Yeah. And sometimes that's a flaw, to be too accessible.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The annual review, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. An annual review is a great example of a socializing agent, but as a leader, the way you model the behavior, what you reinforce, what you highlight, what you reward, what you punish, and say, you're not getting a merit increase because, or you're getting a lower one because, all of those things will absolutely set the culture. I think leaders frequently underestimate what they do to create the culture of the team members underneath them. People model leaders' behavior, they'll model level of informality, they'll model respect. openness, authenticity, vulnerability, communication style. Those are so critical. So it always, I get a little nervous when I see leaders saying they want one thing, but they're kind of doing the other and expecting the other, team to.
Yeah, it's a lot like parenting. The kids are going to
Exactly
follow with
like
what you
parenting.
do, not what you say sometimes.
Yeah. Well, if you think about what parents do, we socialize.
Yeah.
Parents socialize behaviors into their children. I always joke about the shoe thing because, I came from the, take your shoes off as soon as you come into the house. And to this day, I'm 53 years old. And to this day, if I walk into someone's house, I really have a hard time keeping my shoes on. I mean, my mom's words are because it's socialized. We're not born with our cultural behaviors or norms or values. We learn them. But once we have them, to change them, adapt them, they can change and adapt. But we need socializing agents. We need leaders or peers or something in play that will socialize our behaviors.
So let me ask you this a little bit about. A lot has changed in the past, year with the pandemic and COVID and people being more remote than they were before. How has this impacted business culture, our people's culture, other than, I guess Zoom's probably one of the biggest ones, but how have you seen other things that have been impacted based off of political unrest, social issues, and other things that have come up a lot in 2020 and 2021?
Those are there. I hear two really good questions in there.
There's probably three in there somewhere.
One is around org culture, and another is sort of around the diversity and inclusion space. Yeah. In terms of org culture, companies that started out with extremely strong organizational cultures and then had most of their folks working from home, if leaders were able to continually reinforce their organizational culture, their culture might be diluted a bit. New people were hired in during the pandemic, blah, blah, blah. The norms were slightly more loose, a little looser. So their culture's kind of tamped down a bit, but if they were strong to begin with, they'll resurrect very quickly. And the cultures will be strong again when people are even if they're staying about 3 days a week, even if we don't go back 5 days a week, but if we go back at least 3, culture will come back. If cultures were weak to begin with, the leaders have a much tougher climb there, because now people have grown accustomed to kind of operating in their own structure, their own norms, their own way. We created the environment that we like. We started using interaction methods that we most were comfortable with, and then what ends up happening is we've got a whole lot of people operating with their own sets of norms. So leaders have to be very structured about the norms that they create. And with that group, I would strongly encourage people coming in. I know nobody presumably likes to work in an office anymore, but 3 days a week to try to recreate that culture. If that's how the company wants to compete. So that's on the work culture side. I'm happy to talk about diversity and inclusion too.
Yeah, well, so just to respond to that, I think I found just as a leader that it's much more difficult to try to maintain the culture when you're all on Zoom than when you can come in and have those face-to-face interactions. And one of the things we do is we do walking one-on-one. So when I do one-on-ones with my team, we're outside walking around the pond or whatever at the office, and I don't know, it's something about being outside and being with someone that's not just trying to do a one-on-one on Zoom. It was kind of like, I just feel distracted. Even if I close Outlook and I close, Slack or whatever, I still feel distracted doing it remotely. I don't know why that is. Even with the camera on, it's still something that you have to really try to focus. Whereas when I'm outside, it's like conversation just seems to be more natural. It's just one of those things. So I think that is something that you're right. I think it will bounce back quickly once people are back in the office.
Well, on Zoom, if I may, John, we're attending to the reason why walking works so well is because you don't have to make eye contact. So it's one less thing for your brain to be thinking about. You're kind of walking in the same direction. So there's some mirroring going. If you ever notice, this is going to sound a little creepy, but if you ever notice, the more engaged your conversation, the more that you and the person with whom you're walking are in sync, you'll see that unintentionally, even if you're of different heights, your steps will start to align. If you ever, for the fun of it, if you're sitting in a park or something, watch like people walking by, the more they're engaged, the more they're in sync, the more their steps align. So there's all of these kind of mental cues that put you kind of in the zone of having a deep, rich conversation when you walk. With Zoom, we've got lots of things going on, lots of things to attend to, including ourselves. So our brains are still processing. A lot of times people don't look at the camera, they look at themselves.
Yep.
Talking, that sets your brain, that's using up part of your brain. Remember, our brains are inherently lazy. It's exhausting because your brain cannot do all the things that you're asking it to do at the same time, including,
Yep.
listen and attend. So there's a lot of things that it's harder to mirror when you're on a camera. We feel less of a need to, even though we still should be. Anyway, so there's lots of reasons why one works and the other doesn't.
Yeah, it's interesting when you said, when you were talking about smiling earlier, I looked at my camera. I was like, oh, am I smiling? Because I need to be smiling. Because sometimes I get my whatever.
The resting different things, yes.
Yes. Resting blessed spaces, I call it. So going back to the other topic, how has some of the social issues, diversity and inclusion and things like that affected culture in businesses and companies these days, especially here in the United States?
Right. So I know, I don't know if your organization is doing it, but a lot of firms now are offering something called unconscious bias training and microaggression training and the like. And truthfully, I wish they would all stop. I wish everyone would stop, because basically what it's doing is it's introducing everyone to our limbic systems. Limbic systems are basically 1/10 of a second, a fraction of a second. You're processing subjective norms around you. So you and I, so to your listeners, we're on video, we're processing cues about each other prior to actually even interacting. You do this with the world around you. It's how we work. So that the idea of calling it a bias is actually having a very negative effect. It's human. We all have been, however many years you've been on the planet, your brain has been storing the data to help you interpret the world around you. Calling it a bias is having a subtle effect on people who became nervous. I don't want you to see my bias. I don't want you to think that I'm biased. Therefore, I'm going to subtly avoid the conversation with somebody who's demographically different. So younger millennial, I found out I'm biased against, oh goodness, no, I'm going to avoid that, right? So you lose the ability to have authentic conversations. Of course, I'm using hyperbole in describing it, but what's happening is that we're doing the exact wrong thing for building cultural agility. The way people build cultural agility is to have more of these natural conversations, have more of these interactions with people who are demographically different functional areas, cultures, different generations, whatever. So I'm very, very concerned that, sort of the fad was to throw a training program at something that actually is more development and awareness. That's why we had started Skillify, actually.
So do you think some of these training programs are just, they're maybe financially motivated to put them out there, because I can create a diversity and inclusion class and sell that and to a larger business. And also, do you think maybe these are causing, you mentioned that maybe it's causing negative behaviors. Are they causing the opposite of what we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, some of the research is bearing out to that effect, that it's actually doing the opposite. So you're sort of heightening your awareness of something you never, I mean, it's great that we're now all aware that we have limbic systems. I mean, that's fantastic, right? But that was enough. Just let us know that, and let us know that we need to slow down the processing like you did 15 minutes before your meetings. That's all well and good, but I'd rather spend the time on the skills to build the cultural agility competencies than the unconscious bias training. And for me, it was just I think everybody jumped on it because it was something we could do and do quickly. It felt like it was in response to a challenge that was needed, and maybe the answer is okay. Yeah, that and let's keep going. Don't end there. Yes, that's why we started.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach. I think we need to keep going, but maybe focus more on developing those. What is it called? Emotional intelligence type training
Oh,
and
agility skills.
yeah, agility skills. There you go. Cultural agility skills for sure. So tell me a little bit about why you decided to uh, put this book together and what was the driving factor for creating it.
Yeah, I think we've been describing it. So um, there are so many issues that happen when people who are just functionally or demographically different work collaboratively. So, I mean, my clients include people like pharmaceutical sales reps who are selling to foreign and heritage healthcare providers.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my clients are construction teams, and they have to work collaboratively when people are of the different trades and different some are, and the architects are interacting with the tradesmen and the like. um, and everything in between. It's not, it is, some professional sports teams have to work collaboratively when even though they're playing the exact same game,
Mm-hmm.
just their style and the way they interpret behaviors are different. So the response was, how do we get people better at this? And it's not intuitive. John, it's the one competency that on every survey, people bottom out in terms of their ability to be comfortable and effective with people who are demographically different, functionally different, have a different set of values. So I wrote it to say, look, it's not just building awareness. It's not like, it's kind of the necessary but not sufficient. It's that whole moonwalking bear stuff. Now that you know to see it, you'll see it. But now what? Now we need these 9 critical competencies in order to be really effective in that environment, to really start to build out those skills. It's not unconscious bias training, I promise. It's actually, skills.
Yeah, and those are skills that you can use everywhere, right? Not just at work, but at home and in sports or wherever.
Absolutely, absolutely. They're wonderful skills. Anytime you're in a situation of novelty, both just you yourself on your own or multicultural.
Yeah. So what has been kind of some of the biggest responses that you've had from the book as far as like positive takeaways that people have had that you can share?
Yeah. So a lot of people, as part of the book, I hope it's okay that I mentioned. So there's a free app as a part of the book, and you don't need the book to get the app. I'd love for you to get the book to get the app, but you don't need the book to get the app. Yeah. It's actually a web app, a responsive web app. You can go to www.myguide.com, but guide is spelled in a funky way, GIIDE. So myguide.com. Mm-hmm. The idea was that we wanted to be able to make these cultural agility assessments available for free. So the response to the book has been great. The response to the app has been they've been feeding each other. People are going onto the app, they're learning about their cultural agility competencies. The app has some guidance on how to build them. The book has even more guidance on how to build them. The app has some information about how countries and cultures differ. You can kind of look up different pieces of advice. The app does a little bit more in terms of helping you in those multicultural environments. So I think what's happening is that the readers and the people who have been playing around with the app, they're kind of connecting with one side or the other, or sometimes both, either the competency side or the cultural differences side.
So do you find when people that haven't been, so like I grew up in South Carolina and didn't have any international exposure really until college. And do you find that people that maybe haven't had any international exposure, when they go through this assessment, are they shocked? Are they surprised? Or is it kind of what they would expect? Or what's the typical response for something like this?
Yeah. So depends on which side of the house we're talking about. So on the cultural awareness side, people who have never had ever had any intercultural interactions, they're surprised to learn how much their values could differ from someone from another culture, and interested to see that we might be seeing the world differently. And that's great. That building out the awareness is so very important. What's interesting on the other side of the house, though, and that's the cultural competencies, is that individual, and to me, frankly, the more important side,
right?
That's, you don't ever need to leave your home, your home state, your home province, your home, whatever, your home country, to have great cultural agility. I mean, you might have a natural sense of resilience and tolerance of ambiguity and perspective taking. You might be natural at relationship buildings, and it's just you might just be a natural at these competencies. There's a hard wiring to those. Often what happens though, if you're pretty hardwired for these competencies, tend to seek out experiences that push you there a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. You want to try to. I know when I first had the opportunity to go overseas for college for a class, and I was like, yes, I'm going, 100% going. People are like, why do you want to go study in Germany? It's like, because I get to go to Germany. Like, why wouldn't I not want to? So
that's your dopamine side. That's that thrill seeking, sensation seeking. Your comfort with novelty, your interest in experiencing something new and different. Usually, people, when given the opportunity, can. We'll seek those out, but some people just haven't had the life experience. The same is also true. I get really concerned when I see companies say, "Oh, I'm so we're so glad to have this person. She's a great global leader. They've been lived in lots of countries or been to all these countries," and I get really nervous because just because somebody's been to another country or lived in another country, it's not like fairy dust drops over them because they landed in another country and all of a sudden they become culturally agile. A lot of people will go on these international assignments for a few years and they just cling to anything familiar. So they hang with other compatriots. If they're American, they hang with other Americans. They find the international clubs. They have American friends if they're American. It just they can somehow manage to have a 2-year experience in another country with zero cultural interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's easy to do today because I mean the Western culture is kind of, there's McDonald's everywhere. You can always eat American food wherever you go. But I think it's something for sure it's a different thing when you go and try to experience that culture by doing something totally different, and trying to, I guess, experience as much as you can in the shortest time as you can. Have you seen the cultural agility fall more prevalent on like introvert versus extrovert, or is there any kind of correlation to that?
Oh yeah, you asked a question that's near and dear to my heart because I'm a natural introvert.
Me too.
I'm a natural introvert, and basically all introversion means is that your dopamine gets spiked in situations of novelty that are socially based. So if you're meeting people for the first time, you kind of your dopamine will spike and it'll feel like, your brain's going too much. And that's really what, it's not that shy, it's not that you can't public speak, it's none of those things. It's just that ability to kind of push yourself into social situations that are new and novel. But anyhow, yes, the data in fact say that extroverts people who are naturally extroverted, they tend to do a little better in multicultural settings because they're more comfortable. Their brains aren't doing the things that make them kind of want to move to comfort. So yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Sorry to say.
Yeah, I'm naturally introverted, and I try to, like doing the podcast, for example, and trying to speak at conferences and things like that, to try to become more comfortable with extroverted scenarios. Like one of the things I do when I go to a conference is I only book like every other session, so that the sessions in between I stand in the lobby and try to, like, how many people can I meet today? How many, and I'm usually like sweating and nervous and exhausted by the end of the day. I'm like, I'm just gonna go to bed.
Yeah. It's and then I'm sure if you do a bunch of keynotes after a while that your dopamine's not spiking, or meeting is not challenging. And it's actually the ambiguity for most introverts isn't being introduced to new people, it's going up to new people, because that's where the unknown is, and that's the need for that.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I really enjoyed talking to you, Paula. How can people find out more about the things that you're doing? And I forgot, what is Skillify?
Yeah, well, I mentioned My Guide.
My Guide is a link from there. Yeah,
parent company. It was really excited about it, John, because we started it as a public benefit corporation, and you'll notice in all of our tools there's that double I. So Skillify is SKIILIFY. The idea is that we want to help cultures and people see eye to eye. So right now, the first product that we launched with is My Guide, which I mentioned to your listeners. They're welcome to go on. It's free. We hope lots of people take it and learn from the tool. But over time, we really do hope to build out communication tools that are publicly available. So it's
Awesome.
really exciting.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. How can people find out more about you, more about Skillify, get the My Guide, and pick up a copy of your book?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. It's Build Your Cultural Agility. My surname, if you can figure out how to spell it, yeah, I certainly would be happy to connect on LinkedIn. That's also a place where I post more information about cultural agility. The website skillify.com is also another great place to connect with me.
Awesome. And I'll link those up in the show notes at geekleader.com and put your book in where our page of books from our guests are located. And we'll share that out. So thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
All right. We're clear. So that was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that went well.
Because they go really fast. I did look at my watch once.
Yeah, no, I thought it went really well. I really appreciate it and enjoyed talking to you. Definitely feel free to come back and we can chat some more. I think culture is one of those things that a lot of tech leaders take for granted when you're moving up, but I think it's important for everybody. So.
Yeah, well, you have my contact information. If you ever, need a filler guest, let me know.
All right, we'll do. All right, take care.
Thanks, John. Take care.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some T-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.